First thing you have to remember is that this was not one artist, one big genius artist, but these were groups of people. Groups of people who saw themselves more as artisans and craftsmen than artists, which is a term that didn't really exist. And there was a first group that would come, surely under the supervision of somebody who was literate, who would sketch out in black or red ink how they thought this whole thing should come out. They would indicate by lines, straight lines, the height of the shoulder and the height perhaps of the knees or the elbows. And we have that in the vestibule of the tomb. And then the next group would come, and that's the group of the sculptors, who would start first removing the background between the sketched figures. They would start sculpturing the interiors of the figures with all these beautiful indications of the musculature. And that's the real, what we might say, the creative moment of making this art. And of course, then the last stage is the painters come, and they paint what has been sculpted, and only then it is finished. The tomb is in this way of having only the sketches in the front room. The tomb is unfinished to a certain degree. It was clearly used, the person was buried, and we have to assume that he died perhaps sooner than he had thought. And that then it was more or less said, well, that's it. Let's leave the vestibule as it was.
Inside the tomb of Perneb, where the altar is located, that glass had been installed in 1916 and had not been changed, modified, or adjusted in any way. And you know, the pioneering concept of glass in front of the walls in 1916 left us with very dark green glass in the 1990s.
So that glass had to come down. And then a thorough conservation work was done over almost a year by conservators of the museum. And that was our first thrust, of course, into this project. In thinking this through with among the designers, curators, and the architects, we really came to the conclusion that we should not, at this point, only renovate and preserve, do something for the preservation of the decoration, but we should rethink the way the museum is presenting this unique monument. Since 1916, a lot has happened in our understanding of Egyptian art. During all these years, when you came into our first gallery of Egyptian art, you were confronted by this monumental facade of the tomb. For the Old Kingdom, this is wrong, because Old Kingdom architecture did not show its monumentality by opening a facade towards the viewer. It was closed in.
So as the years went on, everyone kept questioning what to do with the tomb, how to make it look more appropriate to the site that it was excavated from, to give it the reference that it really should have had. We started looking at all the excavation photographs, looking at the details of the construction of the walls. The tomb that was on the face of the Perneb tomb had a massive wall right up against where Perneb was.
So we thought we would put up a wall, but we would show that wall in a ruined state. After all, this is a 4,000-year-old monument. So the ruined state is a very natural state for it.
A theater set production person from the opera made us a full-scale foam mock-up of this wall. Because we looked at it and we realized this looks like the Flintstones here. And when Philippe walked in, he looked at it and said, if this turns out to be Disney, forget it. You're not putting this wall up.
That wall that we were putting in here and adding newly to the monument had to be as authentic as possible.
We were in Egypt, and we went out looking in the desert to try to find around the step pyramid in Saqqara where the Perneb remains were. And it's probably one of the most exciting adventures in all my years of traveling with curators, because here was Dorothea running twice as fast as me, up and down the knolls and hills of sand near the step pyramid, and all of a sudden she turns around and says, "It's over there, it's over there." We run over, and boom, there is the tiny little fragment of the wall left, sticking up out of the sand dune. And I said, that is it. We've actually found the corner of the wall. Then we had to find just the right example of how the wall would flake and break and crumble and pieces fall off naturally. And we actually found a wall, and that wall was exactly the kind we're looking for, which had two sides that were completely intact and the middle part that had been completely collapsed.
The second necessary step was to get sculptors who would know how to treat these stones, shape the surface in the ancient techniques. And we were very fortunate in being able to employ a sculptor, Danny Roy, who is very well versed in the ancient techniques.
And Danny brought us to a wonderful quarry that was the same quarry that the stones were excavated from for the original tomb. The stone was carved and shaped and actually stacked for us when we made a return trip and went to the quarry yard. Then the entire group of the factory ended up having to take the wall down block by block and crate each block and ship it here to New York. The fascinating part of watching Danny Roy and all of his associates working with him here in the galleries was that they were using original tools. It was the only way they could get the right effect and look of the stone.
You know what you can get? What milk you make?
And the very simple way that they rigged the stone to lift it up and hoisted it up on top and set it in place, you know, except for the metal piping, it's the same thing that the ancient Egyptians would have done in wood. One of the most entertaining things that was happening as we were doing that, though, was everyone was very afraid. Well, we don't want to touch the wall. We don't want to mess up the wall. We want to do anything to it. And I kept saying to them, break it. Scratch it, mark it. I need scratches. I need chips falling out of this wall. I want this wall to look like it's been here a long time.
So one main point was we reopened the side entry so that people can now come again, as they would have done in ancient times, through that side entry. And so in the end, we hope we are not only showing a more cleaned and better preserved tomb, but we also wanted to show it as close to the original setting as we could get with our present understanding of this architecture.
In a sense, the recent renovation of Perneb's tomb reflects the kind of renovation, the intellectual renovation that we've had in Egyptology in understanding what this tomb is and what it means. It's not just a dead work of art. It's also a monument of a living human being and a living civilization.